Welcome. Delighted to be with you. This presentation is somewhat different than from most that are in this event, the eFormation event, because it's less about technology per se and more about facing some of the challenges that many of our faith-based organizations face, whether that is a congregation or a diocese or a synod or a seminary or a ministry of publishing, and how we can think differently, make different decisions to have sustainable, vital futures to proclaim the gospel. So if you are really wanting something that's much more tech-oriented per se, I will not be offended because there are so many wonderful workshops going on here. So just wanted to give you fair warning as to what this particular event is about. So grow, hold, fold. The meaning for that will become apparent in a bit. We all are facing a lot of these kinds of central challenges to our ministries. The societal views on the importance of religion have changed radically in the last couple of decades. Congregational trends, we know them, they're grim in many places. Reaching folks who are millennials or people of any generation who self-identify as nones, selecting none of the above in terms of their religion and their faith base. We've seen lots and lots of data, whether it's from Gallup, like this one, or it's from Nielsen, or it's from Pew, or it's from Hartford. We've seen lots and lots of data showing the relative difference of the importance, or lack thereof, of religion by generation. So in the case of this particular slide, this data from Gallup, it shows the red bar at the top are the greatest generation, as they're called, those born before 1928. Then the silent generation in the yellow, 67% of them say that religion is important to them. Moving to the boomers, moving to the Gen Xers, and then that little dot down there at the bottom, we're at 40% the millennials born 1981 or later. So we can see that through the generations, the importance of religion is in decline, and we see that reflected in many of our institutions, especially our congregations. In the main line, those of us who are Episcopal and Lutheran and Presbyterian, this note is a very short window, only 2010 to 2014. It's kind of shocking because we're used to looking at 20-year timelines or 40-year timelines. This one is only 4 years, and those numbers are very, very depressing. But I think it's important to face reality if we're going to make the kinds of changes we all need to make in order to be vibrant and vital ministries. As we know that the kids need to be brought to church in order to have that solid sense of faith community. This is from the National Congregation Survey. And again, if you look at those of us who are in mainline denominations, which are most of the folks at this conference, are looking at some serious declines, down to 16% of the average of the regular attendees in our congregations are children, down from 26% as recently as 1998. I'm out of the ELCA, the Lutheran tradition, and this is some data that we have shown because we're a ministry of publishing. We're also a business of publishing. We don't receive financial support from our denomination. We have to create stuff that people want to buy for their ministries. And Sunday school is our single largest market traditionally. We're literally, as a ministry of publishing and a business of publishing, watching our single largest market evaporate in front of our very eyes. So this is a 20-year look from 1990 through 2010. What it shows is in 1990, in the ELCA, there were about 1 million children in some kind of weekly faith formation. whether it was Sunday school or Wednesday night, pick your day. By 2010, that had dropped to 400,000. Shocking, terrifying. And I suspect if I had the data, which I've looked for, but I haven't been able to find, for PCUSA, the Episcopal Church, UCC, and so forth and so on, I would find that the data looked quite similar. So it's sad as a ministry. It's also sad as a business. Just in case we didn't have enough challenges serving the church and its myriad declines, we're in the publishing industry. Perhaps you might have noticed that there have been a few changes of late in publishing. And as Lutherans, of course, we look back to Martin Luther and we say, you know, this was a guy who figured out how to use the technology of his day, the movable type printing press, to proclaim the gospel. Now, we don't think that Martin Luther was the only one who did that. There are lots of reformers who used the movable type printing press to proclaim the gospel 500 years ago. But we feel like, you know, this is really in our DNA to take advantage of technologies, which is one of the many reasons I love this eFormation conference. This is my second year to be here, and I wouldn't miss it because I think it is such a vibrant community of sharing of ideas of just how to use today's movable type printing presses. So we have gone in this ministry of publishing from Gutenberg to Google over the last 15 years or so. However, sometimes there is resistance. There is resistance among our staff. There is resistance from our customers, our partners in ministry across the church. Now, you might be entertained to know that one of my colleagues put this together by crowdsourcing it on Facebook, inviting folks to share with us what are the excuses that they have heard for not changing in their place of ministry, or that country club place that they gather on Sundays, whichever is appropriate. I'm seeing a few photos taken, so I'm vamping here to give you time for your photos. And yet, I am so proud of my colleagues because, in fact, while Augsburg Fortress was nearly bankrupt when I came in 13 and a half years ago as CEO, we have worked really hard and made lots of very difficult decisions, and they haven't all been right. And we've learned some lessons that I'll share with you because I'm proud to say that we are now sustainable. We're now more stable than we have been in a long, long time, and creating really innovative resources for the church and for Christians in their homes. So I think there are some lessons, and that's the essence of this workshop, is to think about what are the lessons that we applied to a ministry of publishing that can apply to other parts of the church. First, listen, test, and learn. This is kind of the essence of how we got started. One of the things when I first came into this role, I was told as I was interviewing that Augsburg Fortress was really kind of in its ivory tower in downtown Minneapolis, not connected to congregational life and other parts of the church. And so I spent the first 2 or 3 years listening to customers. I literally was on the road, something like 80% of the time, out in congregations, in seminaries, in synods, in bookstores, all kinds of places, asking and listening to what the needs were from the church. And folks told us, they were very clear on what they needed. You know, if you ask and you listen deeply, people on the front lines of ministry will tell you. I also listened closely to my colleagues. At that time, there were 270 employees of Augsburg Fortress, and I spent in the first year time one-on-one with each and every one of them. And one of the things that was kind of fun that I did was I interviewed them basically in alphabetical order because it got rid of levels. So it wasn't, oh, we'll start with the executives and then we'll go to the directors and then we'll go to the managers and then we'll go to the supervisors. So if you do it alphabetically, it's random. And so that was a great way to send a signal to the colleagues, these new colleagues, most of whom I didn't know, and say, how can we improve things? So I had 5 questions that I asked. I would ask them to tell me about themselves. You know, what do you want me to know? It can be as little or as much as you like. I'd ask them to tell me what they did at Augsburg Fortress, not what their job description said, but what they really do. So what would happen in your place of ministry if you talk to your colleagues and ask them not what their job description says, but how do they really spend their time? And then I would ask, what do they love about their work? And if someone had a hard time answering that question, and some did, then we'd have a different conversation about, why are you here? Life is too short to spend 6, 8, 10, 12 hours, however long you spend per day, doing work that it doesn't feed your spirit. So I would ask them, what did they love? I would ask them what they would change. If we together could somehow wave the magic wand, the proverbial magic wand, and we could change anything about this ministry of publishing, whether it was the way we served our partners in ministry, or it was something, an internal process, and oh my, the stories, and lots of low-hanging fruit to pick to make change. And then the last of the 5 questions was, so what else should I know? I'm new here. What else should I know? Well, if you're in a place of ministry, maybe you're not new there, so it's hard to play that card. But you can play that card by coming back from this eFormation conference and saying, you know, I heard this and I'd like to do one-on-one interviews with everyone here. And maybe it's in small groups, or maybe it's staff, maybe it's members of your congregation, maybe it's pastors in your diocese or Christian ed directors, whoever is your constituent group. And listening deeply to those 5 questions and the answers to those 5 questions can really make a difference in setting priorities. One of the other things we do is we use social media for listening. We do this to listen to our partners in ministry, our customers all across the church. And so we have multiple sites set up on the various social ministry platforms to ask questions, just like that slide that we giggled at with the change for crowdsourcing. We often will pose questions about, you know, what would you like to see in a new next generation confirmation resource, or whatever it might be. And I know that this is preaching to the choir here, but the share of US adults who use social media sites is just climbing. So this slide shows just 5 years from 2010 to 15 by age cohort. And I think it's important as we think about the average age in most of our congregations is somewhere north of 50. Mind you, the average age in our society is mid to late 30s. So demographically, an enormous gap. But even so, if you look at those bottom 2 bars, the green bar and the kind of purple bar showing folks 50 and above, that's still somewhere about 50% of the folks who are in the 50 to 64 age cohort, and 65 plus is the fastest growing and pushing 40%. But now we're in 2016, it may well be at 40%. So you can see that we cannot ignore this, even for folks like me who are in one of those top 2 bars. Not saying which. We also do lots of testing. If any of you were in the presentation yesterday, the workshop yesterday that Bethany Stoley did, she talked about prototyping and testing materials. So we do that a lot as we're thinking of how to craft new resources for the church. We'll make little samples, and sometimes they're pretty rough, but we can give them to, for example, a Christian ed director or to someone who's leading liturgies in a worship space, and have them just try it and see, will this work, and provide us with feedback. So think about how might you prototype things in your own ministry. If you're thinking about having a 6 p.m. Saturday worship service because you just have this hunch or you've had feedback that Sunday morning is not working for a lot of folks, and so you'd like to try out a 6 p.m., well, name it as a prototype. Name it as a test and say, we're going to try this for 3 months or 1 month, whatever is appropriate in your context. And then riff on it, learn from that to make it a more sustainable thing, or stop doing it if it doesn't work. It's okay. Learn. We also bring folks in and we do lots of collaborative things. We call them creative jams, where we bring people just like you and you on the webinar who have talent around a particular ministry, and we bring them to Minneapolis to our office, and we have them there for a day or a half a day or 2 days and invite them to work with one another and with some of our creative talent internally to figure out how to create that next generation thing. So again, this is a technique of a facilitated conversation and brainstorming and drafting even of new ministries that can be done in a local setting. Out of those things have come a resource I'm really excited about. We just have launched it, Frolic, which is a new birth to 3 resource for, it's an online subscription that a congregation can sign up and put in the email address for the caregivers, the parents, the grandparents, whoever it is, and then on a monthly basis, those families will receive an e-newsletter that is age appropriate for that child based on the developmental stage for a 9-month-old or a 15-month-old. And it'll have ideas for faith in development in the home that's age and stage appropriate. That is an idea that came out of one of those creative jams and listening deeply. And we tested these e-newsletters before we launched this resource. We've also got story Bibles and board books and all kinds of other stuff in the Frolic family. But I think the most innovative thing is this web-based subscription for families and for congregations to use. Yes, ma'am.
Does it upgrade with the age?
It does. It just automatically, yes. They put in the age of the child at the time they sign up and the email address for the caregiver, and then automatically through the first 3 months of that child's life, they'll get these e-newsletters.
Is this similar to the old Splash curriculum?
It is. That's a good question. The question is this similar to the old Splash curriculum? And it is. Splash was one of those things that was very successful for us for many years, but it was strictly ink on paper. And people kept saying to us, again, listening, why don't you do this as an e-newsletter? And we thought about converting it. That would have been a lot faster, a lot cheaper. But we felt like, it's been around for 10 years or so. We need to do something new and different. And by bringing this creative jam group together, by listening deeply to our customers across the church, it was something that we said, no, we need to start over and really bring out something that is more for the 21st century. Another thing that we heard, and we've heard, and we've heard, is that people say, that's great that you're doing curricula, but we don't have any kids in our church, or we have very few. And so we need mainline to progressive, theologically sound resources for use in the home by families with young kids, whether they are a member of our church or their kids maybe get dropped off for preschool, or they bring them in for VBS, but we never see them again. Or lots of grandparents who say, my kids are not bringing my grandchildren to church, but I really want them to have some kind of faith resource. So we launched last August, Sparkhouse Family, and it's books, story Bibles, DVDs, streaming video, all kinds of resources for birth to about age 12. And so lots of resources and more coming. The first group of them is, if you're familiar with Sparkhouse, you will recognize that these resources initially are adaptations from intellectual property we already owned. We repurpose things. Oh, repurposing. How might you repurpose things in your own ministry setting that have been tried and true, but that you could adapt for a different utility, that you could adapt for a different audience? So that's where we are today, but by the end of this year, if you go out to the sparkhouse.org website for Sparkhouse Family, you'll see that there's some new original materials that are being developed. Yes, ma'am.
In your Spark, are any of those interactive?
The question is, are any of the Sparkhouse Family resources interactive?
Right, so like if they actually would take the Q code,
Yeah.
they'll find Q codes out that they can actually.
Yeah, they are not yet. Right now, it's they are not interactive yet. They're strictly ink on paper, storyboard books, story Bibles, storybooks, DVDs, and streaming video. We're talking about some apps and that sort of thing, but apps are a really great way to lose money, as it turns out, because nobody wants to pay for them.
Right.
They'd like them for free or 99 cents, and yet, so it's, for us, it's hard to do that, but we are exploring some things, so stay tuned. Okay, so communicating a clear vision. As leaders, it is essential that we communicate a clear vision for what we're about, what our priorities are, and that we do that certainly internally to our colleagues, whether it's our staff or the members of our parish or whatever group we serve. But it's also helpful to communicate that clear vision externally, so that folks, if they're looking at your website or your Facebook page, they get a sense of who you are and what your priorities for your ministry are, and that they, when they walk in the door, there's an alignment to what you say you're about and what you're really about. One of the tools that I brought in to Augsburg Fortress almost 14 years ago when I came was something called the Balance Scorecard. This comes out of the Harvard Business School. Now, when I say that, a lot of church groups get a little itchy because they feel like business things really don't apply to church. I think that is, give me a break, I'm with you. But the Balance Scorecard, I find, works very well in not-for-profit organizations. So the essence of this is, if you only measure the financials, that isn't holistic. So we have annual goals around each of these 4 quadrants. The first is learning and growth. If you've read Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, which if you haven't read it, I commend to you, he always talks about, in that book, getting the right people on the bus and in the right seats. And what he means by that is making sure you have the talent that you need and that they have the right skills and that they're in the right jobs for those talents and gifts. So learning and growth, we have a requirement every year of professional growth for each and every one of our staff members. And it's something that they meet with their supervisors or managers to discern. And so that is a really foundational piece of who we are, because as publishing as an industry has rapidly changed, we need very different skill sets now than we needed only a few years ago. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. The second piece is internal processes of getting rid of the junk that clogs up our systems and finding ways to streamline our processes. So we actually every year decide on 1 or 2 or 3 things that we're going to do that we're going to focus on for the year and make a priority that will streamline our internal processes, freeing up staff time, space, money to do things that are more of a priority for serving our partners in ministry. The third is customer perspective, or you might say member perspective if you're in a parish or a congregation. So what are the priorities that we can measure that are related to a congregation? Might it be how many people will join a small group? Might it be the average number of worship services that are attended? Is it one a month? Can we get that to 2 a month? So only you know what are the appropriate measures for your constituents. But we always have a couple of priorities for customer. And then last is the financial. For us, it's sales and it's managing our expenses. For you, it might be giving. It might be applying for a grant and getting that for a particular ministry. So if you work, the theory about the Balance Scorecard is if you have the right people in the right jobs with the right skills, and they can help improve your internal processes, you will serve your customers better and the financials will follow. It's more streamlined for a business, I think, than for a congregation or a diocese, but I think many of these principles apply. Yes, ma'am.
And maybe you're going to talk about it later, but my question is, in the Balance Scorecard, do you actually utilize, for the learning and growth, any type of LMS, learning management type? And then second part of that is, do you have dashboards that people can actually visually see where the progress is?
Okay, so 2 questions on the Balance Scorecard. She wants to know if we use an LMS, a learning management system, and she also wants to know if we have dashboards to track the progress. So the answer is no and yes. We don't have a learning management system. We've talked about it. Frankly, it just hasn't percolated up to the top of the list of things to do. We all have those long lists, right? And then the second question on the dashboard, we have an intranet that we share information on among our staff, and there is a dashboard for the Balance Scorecard where folks on a monthly basis can see where as an organization we are. We also have an incentive program around this for our staff. So, yes.
I have found it somewhat transformative for me and for my parish staff, just simply to make ourselves a file on our own computer. And when we attend a class or we finish reading a book or we finish seeing a video, we just put it on there. And by the time you get to year end,
yes,
one of the things I love about it is my staff is so proud of themselves because they never realized just how much learning and growth they do during the year because they never tracked it before.
Yes.
And so I don't think you need to have anything as complicated just to get yourself started. Just make a file.
Yes.
On your computer, on your desktop. It's amazing.
I think that's a great idea. What he's saying is that have each, he can hear it, okay. And I think if that becomes a norm, a cultural norm with an expectation from the leadership that this is what we do here, it will embed it and maybe have a brown bag lunch once a month where people can talk about what they've done so that it gets embedded, that lifelong learning and growing their skills can get embedded into the culture. So this is our aspiration statement as a Ministry of Publishing. And folks sometimes say, is that your mission statement? Well, no, not exactly. It's our aspiration statement because it's pretty chewy. To boldly communicate the liberating grace of God to ever wider audiences in an ever-changing religious landscape for decades to come. So if we break that down, well, boldly communicate the liberating grace of God, of course, that's what we're called to do as a ministry of publishing. to ever wider audiences. We're Lutheran. Except that Fortress Press, which is our book division, has been ecumenical and international since its founding 50 years ago. And we launched Sparkhouse in 2009, summer of 2009, to be an intentionally ecumenical, mainline, progressive faith formation division, creating dynamic, innovative resources to serve, certainly to serve ELCA congregations, but to serve more broadly than that. Because we kept hearing, as we were listening and learning, that folks weren't necessarily just going to buy Lutheran stuff, or just buy Episcopal stuff, or just buy United Methodist stuff. Our constituents were already looking across denominations. And indeed, we're blessed that many of our congregations are partnering, that we have Lutheran Episcopal congregations and Presbyterian Lutheran congregations and so forth. And so they're already doing these ministries in partnership. So we in this ministry of publishing needed to get out of our own way and out of our own silo to be more broad in our perspective. In an ever-changing religious landscape, yeah, we got that. And for decades to come. I always say when I'm sharing this aspiration statement with audiences that this is perhaps the most audacious phrase in this statement, because 13 and a half years ago when I came in, the organization was down for the count, having lost $8 million that year, having lost $6 million the year before that, having lost $5 million the year before that. I had folks from our church-wide office say to me, why would you take this job? This is the worst job in the ELCA. My answer, by the way, was because I had a strong sense of call to this. And that's a whole other story I'll tell you later. But there is no guarantee for any of us. We could stumble tomorrow. We probably will, because we'll try something and it won't work. But we could stumble big time tomorrow, and we could fail and be gone. But our aspiration is to be adaptive and innovative and serving our partners in ministry in ways that we are sustainable. Check with me in 10 years and see if we're still around. We'll find out. Grow, hold, fold. Whenever I'm doing this presentation, I always tell people, if you hear nothing else that I say, I want you to hear this, because this is the essence of how to turn around a ministry or a business. So grow, hold, fold means, where do we invest our gifts for growth for the future? So what gifts? Well, the talents of our people. The investment of money, whether it's our operating funds that come through offerings on a weekly basis, or it's that foundation, that endowment that's sitting there gathering dust in many congregations, not being applied to vibrant ministries. It's space. We have wonderful buildings. How are we effectively investing the gift of that space for the good of God's world? So where do we invest our gifts for growth for the future? And what do we keep doing at about the same level? We have a handbell choir. There are 11 of them. They're pretty good. It's probably not going to get bigger. We hope it doesn't get smaller. We're going to keep having a handbell choir. I don't know what the ministries are in your places, but whatever they are, what are you going to keep doing? This is the hard part. What do we fold? Because if we don't fold things, if we don't stop doing things, we will never, ever, ever have the human, financial, space, resources that we need for the growth. What happens in congregations and other ministries is that we fall upon hard times financially. So we lay off some staff, but we don't stop doing anything. And so the person who used to do faith formation for children now is doing faith formation for children, youth, and adults.
With no increase.
With no increase and no additional staff and so forth. Or the person who's doing faith formation now does the communications. Or, I know you all have your examples. What happens is we crush the individuals. They simply cannot do the work that 3 people used to do. So we must stop doing things, which means we must make hard decisions and prioritize. I was in central Pennsylvania this past weekend at a synod assembly, like a diocese gathering, and folks there were, I don't know, 500 people there maybe, and I suppose 6 or 7 of them said, "Oh, I remember we used to have an Augsburg Fortress bookstore here. We miss the Augsburg Fortress bookstore," because I was the person who made the decision in 2008 to close the Augsburg Fortress bookstores because they were losing a lot of money and they had become showrooms for Amazon. Folks would go in, they liked looking at the stuff, touching it, feeling it, but then they'd go home and order it from Amazon. Not a good business model. So we finally had to make the very hard decision to close a dozen bookstores, many of them on seminary campuses. That was popular. And yet we had to do that so that we had the financial, the human needs, the means to do the growth things that people love. So my sort of stereotypical story about this for congregations is the mother-daughter banquet. So now I'm sure that there are some wonderful mother-daughter banquets that are still in existence, perhaps, maybe. So when I was a kid, I loved the mother-daughter banquet. My mom made us matching dresses, white, brown polka dots, patent leather shoes. I can picture it. And we would go on a Saturday for the mother-daughter banquet, and there'd be those little mints, the little pastel ones, right? And there would be a program of some sort. I loved it. I have wonderful memories. If I said to my daughter, Nicole, and her daughters, Caitlin and Lindsay, who are 14 and 10, we're going to do a mother-daughter banquet, they would look at me like I had 3 heads. First of all, Nicole works full-time outside of the house, and she's raising these kids, and they're active, and she's coaching their volleyball, and she's also coaching their Battle of the Books team, and they're right? They're also active in an LCI congregation. Thanks be to God. But a mother-daughter banquet would not speak to them. On the other hand, if we said on Saturday, we're going to have an event at the church where we're going to pack Ziploc bags with washcloths and soap and shampoo and McDonald's gift cards or something for people who are homeless, and we want you to bring the girls and let's do this in an assembly line fashion with some other moms and daughters or parents and kids, they'd be all over that. So fold those old things that no longer are relevant, that no longer work, even if they're beloved by some folks in the congregation, and do the new thing for this generation, for the next generation. Now, one of the gifts we have in the church is that we get to celebrate things. So when the matriarch who loves that mother-daughter banquet and doesn't want to give it up is anxious about it, have a celebration in worship for her 27 years of ministry leading this. Thank her publicly and celebrate this ministry and help transition it in a liturgical way. It's not perfect, but it sure beats just shoving it to the side. So, as I said before, if you remember nothing else, if you take nothing else from this, I hope you will take Grow, Hold, Fold, because it's where real change happens. And there will be slings and arrows, and it's okay. So one of the things that we stopped doing, bookstores, we stopped doing synod assembly displays, having a big display of resources at 65 synods in a 12-week period of time every spring, so that we had the financial means to invest in things like an online Sunday school curricula, which people had been clamoring for. We didn't have the human and financial resources to do both. We had to choose. We also have invested mightily in video production. One of the things that I often talk about is the investment we've made. These are actual pictures from our office in downtown Minneapolis. Should your travels ever bring you there, let me know. I'd love to arrange for a tour for you. And so we have sound studios, voiceover box studios. We have a bunch of animators on staff doing original work. And part of that is an investment that we were able to grow that by folding some things that were sapping our energy. It also means identifying, developing, and retaining the very best talent you can. Sometimes in congregations and other ministry settings, we say, well, so-and-so doesn't really have the talent we need. They don't have the skills we need, but gosh, you know, they're wonderful people. They're good Christians. And they've been here for 18 years or 38 years or pick a number. And we just don't want to have a bad conversation telling them that they need to learn these skills, or we're going to have a different conversation. Really? That's what we are giving God's people, is folks who don't have the skills for the 21st century, or don't have the drive, the energy, for the passion, because maybe they've been doing that for too long. I'm not saying willy-nilly push people out. Don't hear that. What I'm saying is have honest conversations, set honest priorities about what are the gifts and talents you need and the skill sets, and then try to help support folks to get there. But if they can't or they won't, then find a grace-filled way to say, I'm sorry, this is no longer a match. Provide severance, provide outplacement, pray for them, support them how you can, but don't hamstring every aspect of your ministry by keeping someone on staff who is not a good fit for the ministry of today. It is not easy. It will be the hardest thing you ever do, but it's essential. It's essential. So you have to think strategically about your growth opportunities, about what you're going to stop doing, and you have to identify the people who can get you there. You also have to develop them. That's part of that learning and development piece of the Balance Scorecard we talked about earlier. You have to provide them with opportunities for learning. Does that mean you pay for everybody to go get an MBA? No. It means that you support, you nurture, you encourage. Maybe that's reading a book together as a staff. Maybe that's attending an e-formation conference via webinar or in person. Find ways to encourage and nurture professional development. Retain the best talent you can. And that means having honest conversations on a regular basis with what do people want to do? What do they want to learn? What do they want to try? Maybe they should job shadow for a month with someone else on staff. or somebody at that other congregation down the street, or at a local seminary, or a publishing ministry. We invest a lot. Yes, sir.
I'm spoiled in that in a couple of instances in my staff, I have the best talent.
Mm-hmm.
Then, do you have any tips for retention when you have the best?
Yeah. So I think some of it is having an open conversation all the time about where do you want to go in your career and how can I help you get there? Because if people feel supported and nurtured, they're more likely to, and encouraged, they're more likely to stay. One of the things we often run into in the church is people say, well, how can I get the best talent or retain the best talent, because we can't pay as well as a for-profit entity. That's true, but you know what? There's a lot of great talent here and here on this webinar. Folks who have a sense of call and are willing to make less money and work long hours because we are called to this work. And we do it because of the love of it, but we still want to have a fair compensation. And maybe you can compensate in other ways, like some extra time off or flex time. You know, we have flex time for everyone at the organization at Augsburg Fortress, with the exception of the folks who are in our call center, who we have to have somebody to answer the phones, X to the Y, right? But even with those folks, we have home agents. So they are only on the phone from 10 to 2, and they log in from home in their bunny slippers. So finding creative ways for people to work that fits their needs and their lifestyle helps with retention. These are just some examples of things we've used for professional development, because I find if you invest and encourage people to develop professionally, they tend to stay because it's a nurturing, exciting, growing, learning place. In particular, I want you to notice the book at the top right, StrengthsFinders. I'm seeing some nods in the audience here. This is a book that if you don't know it, go out to Amazon right now and buy it. And it is a book that you buy, and then you have a code in there that you use to log in to an online instrument. And you take this little code and see, he has it right here. Very impressive. And then it'll tell you what are your top 5 and 10 strengths, and tells you a lot about those strengths. The theory being that trying to fix the stuff you're not good at is a lot of effort. You know, I can read a P&L, I can put together a budget, but working with numbers is not my native gift. Fortunately, I have a wonderful group of colleagues in our finance department led by a crackerjack CFO who that is their gift. So finding out what your strengths are and nurturing those, or your staff's strengths and nurturing those, is really a much more beneficial way to think about how you spend your time. We use StrengthsFinders for every single person on the staff, plus our board. And we have 15 paid summer interns this year, and they will all go through the StrengthsFinders process. Most of our staff post their top 5 strengths on their workstations. And it's really helpful then as you're communicating with someone, particularly if it's somebody you think, wow, I don't get where they're coming from. Often if you go and you look at their strengths, it's like, oh, I see. That person's really high on the analytical scale, but the getting stuff done scale, not so much. And so when you're developing a team of folks to work together on a project, thinking not just about, oh, we need one from marketing and one from finance and one from whatever, but thinking about we also need some doers and some strategic thinkers, so that we have the folks around the table who will bring these different gifts to bear on the project at hand. So I commend StrengthsFinders to you for use in your ministry settings.
Do you use a facilitator or a facilitated process, or do your staff individually?
They individually take the instrument, but our human resources executive is a trained StrengthsFinders facilitator now. When we first started this, we brought someone in from outside to do it, but we were using it so much that we sent her to the Gallup training so that she's now a StrengthsFinders facilitator. Good question. And you can go out to the StrengthsFinders website and you can put in your zip code and find facilitators in your local area. Bless you. I thought this might be interesting to you. This is our staff. This is what we look like. Does anybody remember how many people I said we had when I arrived? 270. 270. And we're now at 123. So I often hear folks in ministry say, oh, but Beth, you have a big staff and you don't understand. We've had to do layoffs. And it's like, oh yeah, I get it. Trust me. And it is not fun. It's painful. The needs have changed. When I arrived 13 and a half years ago, we had about 19 people who were copy editors on staff. Today, we have none. Well, we're actually hiring one. But why is that? Well, because it was a variable need. We didn't need copy editors, the same number of copy editors every day, all day long, 52 weeks a year. So, and there are lots of freelance copy editors who are very, very good. So we've made that a variable expense. However, even as our workforce has shrunk dramatically, 3-4 years ago, we had, I think, 3 people in our animation and video studio. We now have 19. It's coincidental that those numbers match. We have invested heavily in animation, original animation and video, because look at you. You all have your screens, and you on the webinars, I know you are in front of a screen. And so that's what people want for next generation faith formation, is whether it's in the home or it's in the church or in a seminary classroom, is they want animated videos or other kinds of videos. Yes, ma'am.
On your pie chart up there, you have a category that says temp.
Yeah.
What is that, and how could we use that in church ministry? Good
question. Temp is a temporary employee that we have a special need for 6 weeks, that we have a special set of skills that we need someone brought in for. And a lot of those folks are in the video area, that if we're working on a big project, we might need some extra help with some voiceover stuff or whatever it might be. I think our summer interns also fall into the temp, but they would not be in this data because this was done in May. And they just joined. I had breakfast with them last week, I think it was. Also look at the age demographics here. I'm at the right side of that chart. So we have skewed much younger than our constituent group when you think of average ages in congregations. And then the years of service, it's pretty balanced. And then you can see the departments. Interestingly, the gender, which we didn't know exactly how it would fall. I mean, this was just data we pulled. Dead on, 50-50. And our executive staff is 4 of us, 2 women and 2 men. So, yes, ma'am.
So you mentioned that you use freelance copy editors. So do those people fall into your temp category, or do you have a different line for
that would be a different line, unless they're on site for some period of time, like 6 weeks or a month or something. Then they'd be temp. But generally, if they're freelance, it's just on a work for hire basis. Okay. We also have, thanks be to God, lots of creative talent from all across the church, who are writers and designers and musicians of various types. And so while we only have 123 folks, I'm seeing people seeing Phyllis Tickle up there. Yeah, I see her too. So we are in partnership with creative folks all across the church. And this is a picture of a group that worked on our Animate Practices resource and adult faith formation video and print resource on spiritual practices. I'm pausing so a photo can be taken. Drive out complexity is number 5. Getting rid of stuff that is you need to have done, but it's not your core competency, or that you're using an old methodology and it's 5 steps to get something done when 2 would be just fine. Examples, do you have an approval process for paying bills that requires more than 2 signatures? Some ministries still have, they've gotten rid of the carbonless paper where you had all the signatures, but they haven't gotten rid of the process that went in along with that. So you want to be prudent about making sure that the finances are secure, that somebody's not got their hand in the till. Let's not be stupid. But really, do you need 5 people to sign off on it? How about 2? So think about what are the various processes. One of the things that a lot of folks are saying, okay, we do an ink on paper monthly newsletter, and we do an e-newsletter that's weekly, and gosh, that's double the work. Well, why do you do 1 monthly and 1 weekly? Is there a way to mush those together? Or just think, can you do lots of copy and pasting from that weekly into the monthly so that you're not rewriting things? Just look at all of the processes in your organization to try to think about what can you do that gets rid of duplication of effort and streamlines processes, or get rid of doing things altogether. We have about 12,000 SKUs, individual items that we sell. That's a whole bunch. We had a warehouse in Grove City, Ohio until 2.5 years ago or so. And these were wonderfully dedicated people who had worked for a long time with us. But the fact is, the warehousing and fulfillment business has changed because of technology, like every other business. And we were still a very manual process because we were just doing our own warehousing. We could not afford to invest in best practices, use of technology with barcodes and scanners and all kinds of fancy software to really compete with other companies that had top-notch fulfillment. So when the lease was coming due, we analyzed it and we said, okay, we have 70,000 square feet of warehouse. And by that time, because we'd had the lease for, 10 years, say, we needed about 40,000 square feet. So we could have rented 40,000 square feet. Well, we have about 2,000 ebooks now. And so I needed 40,000 square feet 2 years ago, but I would have to sign a lease for 7 years minimum. How many square feet will I need in 7 years? I don't know. Because I don't know where this industry is going. I don't know where the church is going. So how can I sign a lease? Is that good stewardship to sign a lease for 7 years for space that I probably am not going to need, but I'm going to be locked in? So we went with a company called PBD, Professional Book Distributors. Guess what they do? They do warehousing and fulfillment and invest in the technology and the best practices for about 100 publishers. And so we made that hard decision to stop doing that, to fold that, and to outsource it. And it got rid of a whole bunch of complexity internally at the same time, because it wasn't something that we did really, really well. So what are you doing internally that it's never going to be your core competence, but you could outsource in your ministry? Number 6, provide creative space and the best tools you can afford. And I say it that way because I know a lot of ministry settings are challenged financially. I get that. We are. I mean, we're much more stable, but we don't squander money. We invest very carefully, and there's lots of stuff. We have lots more ideas of things to do than we have the time, energy, money, people to do them. But think about what are the best tools you can afford that will have an impact on your ministry. And creative space makes a huge, huge difference. So this is these are snapshots of our new office. We moved in here about 18 months ago, and we love it. We love it, love it, love it. And we've made sure that it was light and bright and airy, and had a good vibe for creativity. I will tell you, by moving from the old office where we've been since 1994 to this new office, catty corner across the street, by the way, we're saving close to $500,000 per year.
Wow.
Hello, that's serious money. We can invest that money in ministry. So one of the things I want you to notice is in the bottom right-hand picture, all those storyboards that are hanging from the wall, because we put up strips in every office and in every open space that are tackable strips made out of this kind of stuff, so that folks can put projects up and move them around and play with them and storyboard. We also put whiteboard paint, or in the cafe, blackboard paint, in all of our offices and all of our conference rooms, plus some other open casual seating areas that people can dream together and draw pictures and brainstorm and have ideas. Whiteboard paint, as paint goes, is expensive. Whiteboard paint to transform a conference room into a creative environment is really cheap. So if you want to shift the perspective about how we do ministry, how we work together as a creative team, go invest in some whiteboard paint and some dry erase markers, because it just changes how people engage with one another. So this is the summary of the 6 points of kind of broad brush ways that we have been able to change our ministry. That's also a business. But I do think that many of them have application to various other ministries. And so I am interested in hearing from you. Pick one. What do you think? What could you take away from here that you might be able to apply, or maybe you have applied, that you can share as an example with one another? And I would certainly invite the webinar folks to chime in here as well. Yes, sir.
Our bookkeeper just resigned. And I'm wondering if that isn't, if it's nobody's best skill. And I'm wondering if doing the bookkeeping and the payroll is something that it would be smarter for us and more affordable for us to outsource.
And probably get better quality. Or
I
do,
hadn't thought of that until just now.
or do a job share. My husband and I are members of a small congregation in South Minneapolis. Now, Lutheran in Minneapolis generally means big churches, right? Well, we have 125 people in worship on a Sunday, which I know for many parts of the country, that's an enormous Lutheran church. But in Minneapolis, it's like gets lost in the rounding. But we have a lot of young kids. And so we needed a children ministry coordinator, but we couldn't afford one with that size church. But we partnered with 2 other small Lutheran congregations in South Minneapolis, and they could have been other denominations, and hired a children's ministry person who worked among the 3 congregations. And that had all kinds of benefits beyond saving money and getting an expertise that we otherwise couldn't afford. But I think your bookkeeper example is a perfect way to streamline, to get some expertise, best practices, save money, all of the above. That's great. Others of you, anything that you heard or that you've done or you're... Yes, ma'am.
For number 6, provide creative space and the best tools you can afford. I'm part of an Episcopal church that came into a 40,000 square foot building that they did not build and couldn't afford. But one of the things they were able to do was rearrange furniture in different spaces.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of having like a couch in that office and a couch in this office that are unused offices, pull them out into the lobby and make them into a square, and all of a sudden you have a natural space for conversation.
Yes. And, you know, last year when I was here, I spoke on congregational hospitality, and I encouraged folks to do a congregational hospitality audit by getting a team of folks from a neighbor church, and you have a team of folks, and then swap and go into each other's spaces to see things, because you'll see it with fresh eyes if you're not in your own space, and vice versa. You could do that for thinking about creative rearrangement of space too. And I saw a hand. Yes, ma'am.
In terms of number 4, I was sitting here thinking that one of the continuing struggles that we have had in my parish, it's an Episcopal church, is the tendency of some folks to say, let's put X on the vestry because they're not very involved and it'll get them involved. And I have said over and over and over again, like a robot, people, you need to make leaders part the vestry. That is not the way to bring people in. You need to be people who are already leaders.
Yes.
Don't put people's butts in the seats to make decisions because you want to make them more active. Bad idea.
Absolutely.
And they tried it a couple of times and found that, oh, guess what?
They don't show up there either.
Well, it just didn't work.
Yes.
Lots of reasons.
Yes.
Like, you want people who are invested to
Absolutely.
be your decision makers. And
Absolutely.
yes, that narrows your pool, but then that brings in what you have said about hospitality. How do you widen the hospitable circles
Right.
to bring more people,
Yeah.
get them more engaged
Yeah.
in ministry to begin with? Then you put them on the governing board.
Right. Maybe you get them involved by saying, oh, this person has an expertise in finance,
Right.
and we're going to have them involved in helping us identify that outsourced possibility for our bookkeeper. So you get them involved using something that's their passion and their interest and so forth. And then if they really step up and they become involved, then 2 years from now you can think of, or a year from now you can put them on the vestry if need be. But you're right, to use that as a way to try to engage is bad idea. Good thought. Yes, sir.
I just like to speak to the StrengthsFinders.
Yes.
We just had a retreat, staff retreat for 2 days, and 1 day we spent on StrengthsFinders, and it was very eye-opening.
Yes.
We had a chart up and charted out the strengths, and we realized some strengths none of us had. And it didn't really surprise us, but it did
Yes.
give us some questions.
Yeah.
What does that mean for us?
Yes, that's right.
In terms of, well, we don't have much discipline.
It is.
We have some great empathy.
Yes. Yes,
So
it is very eye-opening.
That's quite eye-opening. And what does that mean for us as a staff?
And how can you shore that up?
Yes. How can we shore that up? How can we strengthen that and
Yes.
make that happen?
That's right.
And another question is that we work a lot of the stuff we have out a lot and work on the go a lot. And one question that a challenge for us is having a sense of connectivity by what people are working on or doing, and how from the top you can look down and see this is the picture of everything that's going on. Because we kind of everyone's in their own world of operating and operating in their own way.
Yeah.
And so there isn't, we've struggled with trying to use something that kind of says that, okay, we are in alignment and we're working on these things and this person's work is connected to this person's work. They might not know it, but in fact, there's crossover there.
Yeah, yeah.
And so we've tried a few online systems with project management systems and so on. And with mixed success, because then we have problems with compliance and people are not wishing to comply with using the system. So we struggle with that. And I don't know if anyone else has experienced that, but what it would do is give us a sense, more of a 360 view.
Yes.
Of what we're doing. So that's been our challenge.
I don't have any magic answers to that one because, as you might imagine, we have 3 different publishing units: Fortress Press, Augsburg Fortress, that does the Lutheran worship kinds of things, and Sparkhouse, Ecumenical Faith Formation. And so they're doing very different things, serving related but different audiences. And so, trying to keep track of what all of those folks are doing, plus all the support staff that cut across the organization, is a challenge. I often find out about something, I didn't know we were doing that. Oh, darn, that's a good idea. Or, we're doing what? So I don't have any specific answers other than to say that the one thing I would say that has helped us is use of the Balance Scorecard, because we set goals that's cut mostly across the whole organization on an annual basis. And they're big, broad goals, so that, and we keep them in front of people and we measure them. They're very specific, and that helps with lines of communication. And we have, regularly scheduled executive staff meetings. We have regularly scheduled meetings of what we call our directors, so all the kind of the folks who report into the 4 members of the executive staff, so where we share what's going on and what are our joys and concerns and so forth. So, others? Yes, ma'am.
A few of these things, and I give you some props for Sparkhouse.
Thank you.
This. I'm in a children's family ministry, and I'm in a larger congregation in Oregon. And we have for years done a rotation curriculum. So students, maybe 1 week they're in a cooking lesson, 1 week they're in science club. So just for those of you who don't do that. And really we're committed to that, but and there are some curriculums available, but some of the really nice creative ones that we liked were very, very complex. And that was fine when we had teachers who, this was their passion, and they put forward all week long, and they got their own materials, and that was lovely. But that has gone away.
Yes.
And now all of those teachers are busy, and it just became too intense, and it landed on the staff to get them all prepared, which is not something I have time to do. So I was delighted when Sparkhouse came out with rotation, nice, neat, tidy lessons that are easy to prep, and that they can access, the teachers can actually access them online themselves. Right. And are nicely adjustable for them in case they don't know how. And also video training for them has been this great piece, because some of them jumped in and they actually didn't have a lot of big knowledge themselves. So that's been it's been a great learning tool for them, and then they've been able to and it's driven out that complexity much more effective.
Oh, music to my ears. Thank you. Thank you. Did you? Another? Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. I used to be a Lutheran, but then I became Episcopalian. And
we're kind of like cousins. So.
Yeah, well, my mother called me a Lucapalian. It's true. What can I say? So here's the deal. I used to spend lots of time and money at the brick and mortar Augsburg Fortress places. And, if I needed someone to say, Kathy, I got this deal, what you got here? And she'll pull out 3 things in 3 minutes and say, we do this, and so forth. And so I'm still trying to figure out how to get those connections back.
Yeah.
And I don't know what you've done, if you've like, you know, set up little satellites in big churches and have volunteers to say, here's some stuff that, you know, for your spiritual development.
Yeah, that would add complexity for us. So no, we
So I
haven't done
realize that, but
Yeah.
that connection
Yeah.
that made me
Yeah.
spend money to get
Yeah.
new customers
Yeah.
is broken
Yeah.
now. And I'm trying to figure
Yeah.
out, if I wanna
It's
buy
just
more stuff.
changed. Yeah, and we love that. But it's 1-800-328-4648. We have a group of experts who are on the phone who can send you samples. They can point you to the website where you can download samples. And if you describe your challenge, they can help you figure out which of the curriculas would be most helpful or which kind of music and so forth. We've also put a lot of it online, that if you go to wearesparkhouse.org, our curricula, every single curricula, I think, has a full lesson sample that you can download, the leader material, the learner material, and the video, so that you can try it with a group of folks and find out if it works for you. So, and in the Lutheran tradition, we have a bunch of resource centers across the church. These are the most fabulous people. They are so knowledgeable about church life, but also about our resources and others. And so I don't know, I know there are some Episcopal ones. I know there's some ecumenical resource centers. I don't have a list of those off the top of my head to tell you if there's one in your area, but those folks can be really, really helpful. Yes, Lisa.
Just to follow up on that, I was going to say the breadth and depth of downloadable samples were absolutely critical in our choice to go with this curriculum, because I could get maybe one sample lesson from a lot of the other publishers for a particular age range. And I'm like,
Right.
I know they're good with 3-year-olds,
Yeah.
and how are they with middle school?
Yeah.
So, I mean, the samples are tremendous.
Great, I'm glad to hear it. We also have something once a year where we do a sample lesson Sunday, and where we literally, you can sign your church up, and we will, you pick from any of our children's curricula or any of our youth curricula, and we will send you an entire box filled with the ink on paper of a chapter or a lesson for the curricula that you've chosen for all the kids or all the youth in your congregation. And it's gratis, and it's for a particular Sunday or a particular week. And then you can try it, and it's the physical thing that's all the beautiful color and so forth. So you should watch out for sample lesson Sunday or sample lesson week, or if you want to email me, I can put you in touch with the right folks. Speaking of which, I love hearing from people, and I am happy to hear from you. I know that these slides, I sent them in a week or so ago here to the eFormation folks, so I'm sure they'll be posted if they're not already. But if you'd like me to send them to you, or if you have a question, if you email me, just tell me where we met, because 2 days ago I was in Harrisburg. On Friday I'll be in Chicago, and so I don't really remember everybody I meet and what the topic was I talked about. So I'm happy to hear from you. If you have a question about something we're doing, if you're interested in being a creative partner as a writer or a musician or something, I don't make those decisions, but I know who does, and I can connect you. And if you have a question, I probably don't have the answer, and rather than make it up, I'll get you to somebody who actually does know what they're talking about. So don't be shy. You can certainly follow me on Twitter or Facebook or read my blog or whatever. It's really a delight to be with you. Any other questions? Anything from the webinar team? No, nothing from there. Any others? Yeah, Gordon.
I'll try to make this short. As hard as it is to stop doing things that you need to stop, it's even harder to stop doing things that you want to hold on to. Can you share any experience of that situation?
Wow, that's a...
And it usually has to do, we have no money to do this anymore.
Yeah. Well, I have a funny kind of trivial one, which only the Lutherans in the room, like Gordon, will probably really appreciate. For 40 years, I think, so deeply embedded in the culture, 40 years, maybe 50 years, we published annually something called the Little Red Book. Little Red Book was a pocket calendar, beautifully kind of leatherette binding, had all the lectionary dates and this and that. And it was sent out every year in the fall to something like 25,000 clergy in the ELCA and the ELCIC, Evangelical Lutheran Church in Canada. And, you know, it's kind of like the old adage of advertising is we know 50% of it works and 50% of it doesn't. The only problem is we don't know which 50% is which. Well, that was the way it was with the Little Red Book, that we knew 50% of the people were taking it and throwing it in the trash, and 50% of the people really used it. And it was costing us, I think at the end, it was $60,000 a year. And we said, wow, you know, $60,000 a year, that's a full-time staff person plus benefits plus, right? Is this good stewardship? But we also knew it was an entitlement. And I'm not in the Episcopal tradition, you probably don't have entitlements in the church, but in the Lutheran tradition, we do. So we made the decision. Well, first of all, we did some research, we did surveys, we listened, and we heard from folks that they never use it. We heard from folks we wish it were downloadable, we could put it on our Outlook or whatever. And we heard from other folks that they couldn't live without it. In fact, my all-time favorite was I actually received photographs from 2 different pastors in different parts with their 40 years of Little Red Books. And they're tattered and torn, they got rubber bands around them because their ministry record was in the Little Red Book. So this is an iconic thing. So we said, we've got to stop doing this. We cannot afford $60,000. So we said, but let's invest some of that money in creating a free downloadable thing. So it's still free, it's downloadable, it's moving us forward. We did this in about 2008, 2009. And that's still used every year. If you're interested, I mean, we're all Revised Common Lectionary, right? Go to augsburgfortress.org/redbook and you can download it. And then we said, well, but we did the survey and they got this, it was like a third. A third threw it away, a third really wanted downloadable, and a third said, I can't live without it. So we decided, well, let's make it available, but if you really want it, you got to pay for it. So we lowered the price as much as we could. It's $9.95, including shipping, which for a little calendar is a lot of money, but folks want it. And we put it on a standing order program so that people could sign up and they'd automatically get it every year. Well, that number, as you might guess, is going down. But it was a way of saying, we've got to fold this. But it's an entitlement and it's a tradition. How can we do it differently that is a win-win? And there was a little grumbling. But, you know, it wasn't as much as we thought. And I did love those photographs of those 40 years worth of Little Red Books. So there's an example of taking something that you don't want to stop doing, but you've got to do it in a different way, and trying to find that different way that serves and yet accomplishes what you need to. That's the only example I can, off the top of my head, think of. Anything else? Doing last call? Not that one. That's later tonight. Thank you all for being here. Don't be shy about reaching out if I can be helpful or my colleagues can be helpful to you. God's blessings to you.
Thank you.